I can't speak to the illegal harvest and unethical harvesting of organs, but what I can specifically bear witness to um, are specific atrocious war crimes that are absolutely in parallel with what has been described um, above. And let me give example of some of the war crimes. I have taken specific testimony from doctors, nurses, and operating room techs, all of which were abducted from the operating room while they were operating on another human being and taken to Israeli prisons and tortured. One nurse was actually shot in the knee because he refused to abandon a patient while he was still operating on the patient. And um, and then he himself, the nurse, was taken to an Israeli prison where he was tortured, not given any medical care against the Geneva Convention, which Israel was a signatory to in 1950, 2 years after they proclaimed their statehood. And and while every Israeli was carrying a passport that said the word Palestine on it. Um, and as did Golda Meir, for 20 years. This person was given one juice box a day, sometimes every other day. He had um, been set free after 45 days of being blindfolded, was driven after he lost 45 pounds of his body weight, driven to the Israeli border in Khan Yunis, dropped at the border with his open wound draining maggots behind him who infected his wound. A rifle butt was shoved into his right eye, exploding it. And so he crawled to safety for 2 kilometers until somebody picked him up, blinded in his right eye, and his right knee still infected after an Israeli bullet went through it, completely untreated. And he fell into a coma where we found him with bed sores on the back of his ears and the back of his head. He subsequently, as a nurse, had his leg amputated in Egypt after multiple attempts by myself to operate on him to try to save his leg, all of which failed. I have surgeons who were abducted out of the operating room, taken prisoner, all because Israeli soldiers, and he was a prisoner in Israel, all because they claimed that he knew where Hamas soldiers were hiding in the basement of the hospital. And there wasn't even a basement to this hospital. The hospital administrator gave me a tour of it. Only 3 foot high crawl spaces where the air conditioning and electrical and the sewage pipes were running. No room for to even stand up in these tunnels. And this doctor was taken prisoner for 11 months. And he was beat every time he asked to speak to his lawyer. He was beaten 3 times harder if he got to speak to his lawyer. He got his lawyer by whispering into his ear to get his family evacuated to Egypt. He remained in prison, beaten every day. Every one of his fingertips were broken by pliers and crushed. I saw x-rays of his hands. All of his fingertips still had every single one had a broken bone in it that didn't heal. Um, and when he still wouldn't tell them where Hamas was because he couldn't, because he never saw anybody that he could identify as Hamas, and nor could I when I was at the hospital. He then was raped by female IDF soldiers with a zucchini placed up his rectum, and the zucchini was soaked in pork blood. Uh, and then they showed him, when he still couldn't tell them where Hamas was, they showed him a spy picture of his wife and said that was time dated and geolocated out of his house, right by his house, and say, we will abduct her and bring her here and rape her in front of you. And then they showed him the same moment a drone photograph of his children's bedroom window, and they said they will send a missile through his or a drone rather through his kid's bedroom window and incinerate them. Um, the amount of mental torture is far worse than the physical torture that this surgeon went through, an accomplished, elegant human being. He was so physically and mentally tortured that anything else that anybody proposes has to be considered as tenable. I myself walked through mass graves, and I interviewed witnesses to people being buried in that mass grave. And several witnesses have told me that on one night they saw two children dressed in a bright red and a hunter green shirt that were buried alive by an Israeli soldier team. That the bulldozer with a cup full of dirt pushed them into the mass grave, which I walked through. It's at the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in the back courtyard. They pushed him into the grave and heard the screams of these two children and the adult that was with them get muffled as the dirt piled on top of them. They were buried alive. And then there's reports of those same two children's skeletons being exhumed, still clad in the nylon green and red shirts, only their hands were tied behind their backs. So any government that would selectively assassinate children, any government that would bury children alive, any government that would torture accomplished human beings or any human being sexually and threaten the assassination of their children and the rape of their wife, any government that would willingly do that, who is a signature to the Geneva Convention and the Rome Accords thereafter, has no limits to what they're willing to do to get what they want. And this has never been, in the 75 years that this genocide has been taking place, this has never been a Muslim versus Jew conflict. It has only been, I want your land to create greater Israel, and I'm willing to kill your children to get it. That's all this is about. And this is only facilitated by the American legislatures, who are prostitutes, and the British legislatures, who continue to be prostitutes to the Israeli lobbies by taking their money and casting their ethics aside by giving them the weapons and the money that's necessary to continue this genocide. And that's why the ceasefire that is pretended to go on, it will not last. Give the Israelis an excuse to cancel the ceasefire, and they will do so. And it is my prediction they will do so. In fact, one of the clauses of the ceasefire is that Hamas has to cancel all hostilities at the discretion of the IDF. It's their determination whether they've canceled all hostilities. And they will never say that they did. And therefore, the ceasefire will never genuinely take place. This is just a pause as Netanyahu is trying to develop the greater Israel that he showed to the entire United Nations last year.